I there? Where do I want me to stand? She's going to move it. Sweet. So tonight we are live streaming our conversation, which is going to be great for a whole mess of people who have said, we're sorry we can't be here, but we'd love to be able to see it. So to all of our friends out in YouTube land, we will be able to access this after the fact if you go to YouTube and check out the Trinity Long Lake Live YouTube channel. So, and those of you that don't know, that we stream our Sunday worship services as well. If you're hither and yon and you'd like to check those out, just so you know that those are available to you. Just a couple of housekeeping things. Childcare is available tonight. The restrooms, I think everybody is from Trinity, but just in case you aren't, restrooms are available on the mezzanine off of that away. I know a few of you taking a peek at the resources that we have in the narthex. There's a few books that are from our Little Seeds library that are pertinent to tonight's conversation. And if you'd like to take those are available. Am I correct? Yes. So do you need to sign them out or anything? Nope. You can just take them and bring them back and place them in the bin in the fireside room / library. So tonight we are so excited to be able to welcome Matt Myers to facilitate our conversation on all things technology and screens and being safe and creating all sorts of good boundaries. He is going to share with us a lot about how does this affect us, how does this affect our relationships, and we're just so grateful to have him with us tonight. So Trinity family, help me in welcoming Matt Myers.
Hi guys, I'm really excited to be with you, in part because I am in this along with you guys, trying to figure out how to parent my own kids in this digital age. Is it too noisy, guys? Should I be up here? I want to be close to you guys because we're in it together. This is better though, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Let me try. Okay? Okay. That's okay. Okay, great. Everybody can hear me? Back? You guys? Okay. So I grew up in the 70s, the 80s, and I sort of identify the 90s a little bit. And one of the things that I think is different is we had technology, but we had, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. Young people, do you know what a rotary phone is? Do you guys know what that is? Yeah, that's this. That's what it is. That's what it is. And you had to remember numbers. And worse yet, I grew up in a neighborhood with lots of nines and zeros. You had to dial lots of nines and zeros. It takes a long time for that thing to go around. If I misdialed Pat Josephson's number, he had a lot of nines and zeros. I'm sorry, Pat. I know it's a weekend. I'll talk to you on Monday. That was just a lot of work. We had a remote control for our television. He was 18 months younger than I was, and I had to really convince him to go and change the channel because we watched a lot of UHF, which was the channel 29, and when he got up there, if we wanted to watch UHF, he actually had to hold the rabbit ears and often go and get another piece of tinfoil and stand there with his arms up in the air. That was our technology. The world has changed quite a bit. The world has changed dramatically. And we as parents are trying to figure out how do we lead young people into this relationship with technology without much of a template for parenting in this age ourselves. I am right in it with many of you trying to figure it out. My kids are 14, 11, and 7, so I have a girl. My daughter, she's in 8th grade, and she does not have a cell phone, much to her disappointment. She made an impassioned argument a couple weeks ago that she should have a cell phone because when she gets to high school, we live in Minneapolis, there's no school bus for the students, the high school students. They have to take the city bus, and she said, it'll just make you feel so much more comfortable knowing that I can get a hold of you, and if there's something wrong, I can call somebody. And I said, oh, that's a really, she's in debate. Did I say that too? She's in debate. And I said, honey, that's a really, really good argument, but I never, ever, ever want to put my anxiety on you. So although I appreciate the concern about how I feel for you, but I never want you to take on my anxiety. So that's my 14-year-old. Right now, my stake in the ground with a cell phone is 17 years old. Okay, so just so you know, that may change, but right now it's 17. My 11-year-old and my 7-year-old love Madden Mobile. Anybody play Madden Mobile? Any Madden players? Madden player? Yep. What's your platform? Can you share with us your platform? Is it PlayStation or Xbox or? Xbox. Awesome. I love Madden. In fact, it's one of my favorite games. I have a buddy who, every once in a while, I go over to his house, and we play Madden, and we're pretty geeky with it. We actually don't play. What we do is we draft players, and then we set up the team, and we watch our team play. It's because you can autoplay. We watch. It's really nerdy. But I have a game too. So my message tonight isn't about throwing technology out. It's about how do we live with it? How do we figure out how to parent? How do we figure out what a safe, healthy relationship looks like? So that's what it's about. Sometimes we feel that technology is leading us, right? Winston Churchill said, anybody know who Winston Churchill is? You guys, there was a movie about him. Was it a good movie? I haven't seen it yet. Anybody seen that movie? Yes. It's a good movie. Winston Churchill, he said, we build our buildings and then they build us. Right? We build our buildings and then they build us. Isn't that how we're seeing technology engage our system, our culture, right? It's shaping how we're in relationship. It's shaping how we work. It's shaping how we do school. It's shaping our brains. It's shaping everything. And I think the message of Winston Churchill is that we get to decide how we want to engage with it, right? We have to figure out what's the best way to do this for us, for our development, for our relationships, for our health and wellness. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Many of you may be feeling like, this first slide, I think, if I know what it is, flip to the next one. Oh, do I have it? I'm sorry. I've got the clicker. Oops. Okay. Anybody, did you guys grow up with Goodnight Moon? Who grew up with Goodnight Moon? Julie grew up with Goodnight Moon, yeah. So kids, oh, you remember it? Do you remember the little old lady whispering? Hush. That's right. So this is a book that's similar, called Goodnight iPad, by a different author. Let's see. What was the name of Goodnight Moon? I can't remember. Clement C. Hurd, right? Is that right? Anybody know? Yeah, I think that's right. And Clement did the illustrations. I don't know who did the illustrations, but Anne Droid is the woman who wrote this book. I think it's a woman. Anne Droid. You get it? It's kind of funny. Just a little funny. I think it's clever. Go ahead.
In a world where a little old lady whispering hush would never be heard, comes a book for our time.
In the bright, buzzing room, there was an iPad and a kid playing Doom, and a screensaver of a bird launching over the moon. And there were 3 little nooks with 10,000 books, and a huge LCD Wi-Fi HD TV with Bose 5.1, 6 remotes, and 3D. And a BlackBerry ringing with Eminem singing.
Yo, yo.
And a new
BlackBerry,
Facebook friend.
little dated.
And texts with no end. And a viral clip of a cat doing flips. And the bings, bongs, and beeps of emails and tweets. And a fed-up old woman who was trying to sleep. Good night, iPad. Good night, Doom. Good night, bird launching over the moon. Good night, Nooks and digital books. Good night, Eminem.
Yo.
Good night, Facebook friend. Good night, LOLs. Good night, MP3s. Good night, LCD, Wi-Fi, HD TV. Good night, remotes and Netflix streams. Androids, apps, and glowing screens. Good night, plugs and power lights that guide us to pee in the darkness of night. Good night, buzzing. Good night, beeps. Good night, everybody who should be asleep. Good night, pop stars.
Yo.
Good night, MacBook Air. Good night, gadgets everywhere.
So I think that's how we we certainly feel sometimes, just throw it all out. Hopefully that's not the message. That's not the message of tonight. The message is how do we help shape the lives of our young people in a way that's safe, responsible, healthy. So while I'm a parent trying to figure it out, just like you guys, I'm also a marriage and family therapist who works with families and works with young people, helping them reset among other things, helping them reset their relationship with technology when it's become problematic. We'll talk a little bit at the end what that looks like, but we're primarily going to focus on ways to manage this, okay, in our households. So here are some things that we hear at my practice that people are saying and coming to us about. My son is playing video games at all hours of the night, internet pornography, daughter texting all night. I want to be a professional gamer, okay? And all of my friends are online. Those are some of the things that we're hearing. I used to have my spouse plays Farmville in there. Anybody remember Farmville? Yeah. I had to take it out because I got some people don't even hardly remember what Farmville was like. It was only 4 or 5 years ago. Maybe it was longer. Farmville. Anyway, so those are some of the things that we hear when people show up to us. We're going to talk about research regarding the brain, and we're going to talk about strategies for caregivers, how to help your kids manage this, how to help your families manage this. What are kids doing online? In terms of video games, we have online, we have console, we have phones, right? Phones are a platform for video games. FPS, who knows what FPS is? What is FPS? First-person shooter. Give them a Tootsie Roll. Yep, Tootsie Roll. How about MMORPGs? Who knows what that is? What's MMORPGs? What's RPG? Role-play game. MMO. Massive multiplayer online role-playing game, right? So think of World of Warcraft. Think of, anybody ever heard, it's a new one, it's kind of a startup, so it's pretty small. Fortnite? Anybody heard of that? You guys heard of that? Do you know what I'm talking about? You guys know what I'm talking about? Fortnite. Fortnite is an MMORPG. Anybody played that? It sounds super fun. I've not played it yet. It sounds super fun. Fruit Ninja. Okay, so no judgment. Judgment-free zone for a minute. Who's played Fruit Ninja? Yeah. Fruit Ninja. What do you do in Fruit Ninja? That's it, right? Yeah, that's it. Yeah, why does that engage us? Who knows? We'll talk a little bit about why it engages us. But so here are some things that are happening. The influence of video games, worldwide competitions, conferences, movies, TV shows are starting because of video games. Video games has a powerful and enormous influence on our culture. Why are they so interesting? Who plays video games? Anybody play video games? Why are video games interesting, do you think? They're fun, and I get to hang out with my friends. I get to meet friends. What else makes video games interesting? What do you think? Connecting with friends. They're really exploratory. What else?
Problem solving?
Yeah, there's really some cool ways that we engage intellectually with a lot of games. There's a lot of puzzle games out there. There's a lot of strategy games. Many of the MMORPGs are strategy games, too. So there's lots of cool ways that video games and technology kind of engage us in that way. The rules in video games are very predictable. And different than in the real, rules and relationships aren't so predictable. Social media use. Here's what happens in 1 minute in terms of digital content and that kind of things. 571 websites are created in a minute. Every minute in the world. Let's see, where's Amazon? Amazon's up there. In 1 minute, $83,000 in sales at Amazon. Twitter has 278,000 tweets in 1 minute. Now that number is skewed because 100,000 of those come from the White House every single minute. So it's skewed. So 178,000 still is a pretty big number. So a minute. People, we are emerged and completely emerged in the digital world. Our lives and the digital world are kind of syncing up in some ways. So there's some of the things that highlights there. Here are some statistics just about, this was pulled from a Common Sense Media study. 25% of kids report being online through devices almost constantly. Okay, so computers, tablets, phones, 25% report being online almost constantly, right? So they don't know a world without being connected, okay? 90% of children have an online history by the age of 2. So most of us, that's parents. I mean, I've posted pictures of my kids and that kind of thing. That's us starting with that. But 90% of kids already start having built an online presence. 7.5 hours of entertainment technology a day. Okay, so let's differentiate. The AAP is now differentiating between entertainment and educational or vocational technology. So 7.5 just for entertainment, right? That's I don't do math real well. It's a lot. It's like 50. It's like 50 some hours, right? 7 days a week. It's like 50 some ish hours. That's an enormous amount of time just on entertainment technology. And 50% of kids in this survey report feeling addicted. Okay, so when we think about, we'll talk a little bit about what addiction looks like, but my sense is that they feel as though they can't live without it. Right? That's kind of what an addiction would look like. So let's go ahead. Oh, I've got the clicker. I don't know why. I don't know that. So here's a woman named Jean Twenge wrote a book called iGen. It's not out there, but it's another good book to add to your repertoire as parents in the digital age. iGen, I-G-E-N. She is correlating some data about the proliferation of smart devices and mental health, right? So over the past, let's see, it started in 2010 when digital devices, handheld, became really accessible to young people. She says there's a 34%, since then to 2016, there's a 34% increase of people that are more likely to have attempted suicide. 60% are more likely to be depressed than before 2010. Influence, I don't remember what that was, but the average age now of getting a cell phone is 10.3 years. When I started doing this about 7 years ago, it was 11 and a half years. So what's 10 years old? When you're in 10 years old, what grade are you in? Fifth grade? Fourth and fifth grade? Yeah, so fourth and fifth grade is kind of the average right now. If it's average, we've got kids getting them before and kids after, but and then 39% of kids get a social media account at 11 and a half years, and 11% get a social media account when they're 10 or younger. So what age do you need to be to get a social media account? 13, right? You guys know that. So 50%, in this study, 50% of young people had a social media account before the age that they're legitimately allowed to do so by many social media sites. Okay? Just numbers. That's all we're looking at here. So types of digital behavior, we're talking about traditional addictions, pornography, gambling and shopping can become addictive, right? And then we think about who's seen people a couple of years ago walking around with their phones just doing this? Anybody seen, do you know what I'm talking about? What is that? Pokemon. Do you guys have a Pokestop out here? Is the church a Pokestop? Where's the closest Pokestop?
We had a gym in Woolsfield Woods, I think, somewhere over there.
One of the Poke gyms? Yeah. So that's so the new area of expansion is artificial intelligence and augmented reality, right? So a merger of the digital and the real, right? So now I'm out there, I'm engaged with the real world, but also engaged with my device or with technology. The closer to my home, Google Home or Echoes. Anybody have any of those in their house? Yeah. My brother gave me one for Christmas, and then I bought 4 more. They're really cool. They're so cool. They play music all over the house, and I haven't shown my kids how to do this, but I can broadcast messages that go all over the house. They don't know how to do it, but every once in a while I just use my voice, and it shoots all over the house. I love it. I think it's so cool. It has implications for how we do all kinds of things. one of the things I discovered was my 7-year-old was asking me, I was focused on cooking or I don't know what I was doing, and he was asking me, how do you spell such and such? I don't know. I don't multitask. I have to focus. And so I dismissed him. And he said, I know what I'll do. And I kind of heard this later. You know how your kids say something and then it's later on, you were like, oh, now I get what he was doing. I know what I'll do. I'll ask Google. So he went over to Google. He said, Google, how do I spell whatever the word was? And as I realized what was happening, I stopped and I thought, oh my gosh, you didn't do anything wrong, but I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to use it that way, right? Because what I would have done with him is if I was not doing whatever I was doing and stopped and paid attention, I would have said, I want you to sound it out. What's the first letter? What's the first sound? Or I would have sounded out, he would have learned that way. So it has digital technology or augmented reality and artificial intelligence have implications for how we do relationships, how we do family, how we teach, and we have to be aware of it. Okay, so that's the new frontier, that augmented reality. This is an excerpt, maybe some of you saw this, but from a woman, Diane, who was struggling with her son and a cell phone. And what she wrote was that I told my son that he couldn't take his phone, and he had a major temper tantrum. And then she realized, and then she talks about what it was. In one moment, the phone is an addiction. It is a drug. So how can something seemingly so innocent have such a profound effect? We're going to come back to Diane in a little bit, but the temper tantrum she describes can look a little bit like decompensation, right? When somebody doesn't know how to cope with the stress of not getting whatever it is they believe they need, what she describes as decompensation. I'm running out of tools for managing this. I need this so bad, and I don't know how to deal with not having it. So here, when we think about addiction, you guys, this is how in the mental health field we often think about addiction as a behavior that's characterized by the inability to discontinue, even with negative consequences. Okay, so we might just look out here to Highway 12 or and watch ourselves or other people on their phones texting while we're driving. That's really close to compulsive or addictive-like behavior, right? That there are potential negative consequences that are very significant. So this isn't just about kids, right? This is about us too. So I'm speaking to you guys about leading kids, but it's also about how do we do this too. Here are some risk factors for addictive-like behavior. We're going to get into the brain and that kind of stuff. But access is the primary, when we think about addiction, access is the primary risk factor, right? If I have access to something and I can get it whenever I want and it fulfills some kind of need for me, I will continue to do it if I have access. Okay? So family conflict is also another risk factor for addiction or compulsive behavior. Trauma, history of family addiction. Kids with great potential. Here's one of I talk about this because one of the things that I experience with many young people is this narrative that everybody thinks that I have great potential and I'm not doing well. It's better for me, it's easier for me to disengage and kind of hide than to try and not be successful and reinforce a notion that maybe I'm not the great potential that people thought. So I always try and shift that with people to focus, to take that language out. You have great potential. That's a shame narrative that a lot of young people show up with. So other risk factors include autism spectrum disorder, people who get kind of compulsively wired into technology. People on the autism spectrum, their brains really engage with technology in ways that are different from those who don't. It has really predictable rules, and so can be really engaging. And if we're in charge of leading a young person with autism, it's important to pay attention to the way that their brains work, that this stuff really engages them. Depression, ADHD, anxiety, especially social anxiety is a potential for difficulty with a kind of addictive-like behavior with technology. The DSM, anybody know what the DSM is? Kind of the manual for diagnosing mental disorders, okay? So just want you to know that we're doing research in this country on this as an addiction. In Korea, Japan, and China, they have acknowledged it as such. Okay? They are treating this. They have inpatient residential treatment centers for compulsive addicted video game and technology use. In this country, we're still exploring it. But these are some of the proposed criteria. Okay? So preoccupation with, withdrawal from other things that formerly were interested, or relationships, increased tolerance, loss of interest in things once I was interested in, continued use, deceiving, using as escape, and then a loss because of my use. Okay? So let's talk about the brain. This is a Rorschach. What do you guys see in testing? What does that look like? What do you say? Pair of eyes, it's owls. You win. That's right. It's owl's eye. Well, I think it's owl's eyes.
It's like Gonzo to me.
Looks like Gonzo. I can see a little bit of Gonzo. I never thought of that. I can see a little bit of Gonzo. Anybody remember the Nancy Reagan? This is your brain on drugs. Yeah. So I know it was one egg, but I just found this picture of eggs and I put that up there. So let's talk about what technology does in terms of our brain and that kind of thing. So one of the things that technology does is it uses operant conditioning, right? So think about operant conditioning is the best way of helping us learn behavior, okay? So one of the things it does is uses negative reinforcement and it uses positive reinforcement. The negative, it distracts us from difficult feelings, okay? So if we have anxiety or depression, it can be really easy to mask that. And then the positive reinforcement, it's exciting. It's fun, and I get to hang out with my friends. It's novel. There are really intense ways to engage with it, okay? It also uses a reinforcement schedule called an intermittent reward. Anybody studied the Skinner rats? Anybody you guys had Psychology 101? Yeah, so what happens is that the greatest way to produce a behavior is to reward intermittently. I was selling my house about a year ago. We put our house on the market. And if you put your house on the market probably in the last couple of years, on the MLS, you can have like house showings, like show up to confirm, like in your email or something. And I remember every break I got at work, I was grabbing my phone and I was doing this, right? Because every once in a while, what happened? I got a treat. I got a reward, right? I got an email that says you got a showing. And that email, that every once in a while that I got that, it made me do it. I was doing it faster and more often because I never knew when it was coming. That's intermittent reward. That's what especially apps are designed to do, right? So, and then the developing brain has a robust dopamine system. Dopamine is really involved in learning too, okay? So developing brains really have a lot of that. They're immersed in that, and so they're picking up on things that are teaching them. Developing brains do not consider negative consequences. Parents, I don't know if you guys know this, but your kids sometimes don't consider all of the consequences of their choices. Do you guys know that? Kids, did you guys know that you don't always consider the consequences? And developing brains prefer high reward with less effort. To be fair, I do too, so I'm in it with you. But I think one of the things that, as we get older, that delay of gratification piece, right? We have a greater understanding of that. So we're wired. We are wired. Our brains are wired to get kind of sucked into this stuff. Okay. Stopping cues. One of the things that the digital world doesn't offer, like the real does, is a kind of an end point, a natural end point. Okay, so think about it. You're in a conversation with somebody, and sometimes there's an awkward silence, but many times there's a sense that, okay, this is, our time is done. Or think about reading a book, right? You get to the end of the chapter, you get to the end of the book. That's a natural stopping cue. okay? Think about our engagement in the digital. There aren't those kinds of stopping cues, right? 5 more minutes, Mom. I'll do it when I'm done with my game, Dad, right? There aren't, and how many of you are 5 minutes is not 5 minutes? Am I right about that, right? There aren't those stopping cues. So we don't know how and when to stop. And young people who are being kind of wired and oriented around technology aren't figuring this out for themselves because technology is wiring them in a way that they aren't figuring out how to do that for themselves. Okay? Television, Netflix is really learned from this too, right? Think about how binge watching shows, right? Is it 10 seconds or 15 seconds when it goes right into the next one? Right? So they're trying to take away those stopping cues, right? Broadcast TV. Do you guys know about broadcast TV? You turn on channel 11. Do you guys know about that? It's not streaming. Well, anyway, they have the credits run, and they've gotten pretty good at merging shows in together too. But it's still a bit more of a stopping cue than when we're immersed in social media, when we're in Snapchatting, when we're playing video games. There aren't those stopping cues. That's what young people need us for. They need us to help create those stopping cues for them because they're not able to do it on their own. A doctor at the University of Arizona, Dr. Luis Almeida, he said, computers are training us to be computers. His notion is that computers work from 9 when they're created to forever, right? And because there aren't these stopping cues, one of the things that's happening for us is we're kind of working from 9 to forever, right? We're not sleeping like we used to. We're on our phones, or we're playing games, or we're watching shows well into the night. We don't do that well. We are finite beings. Computers are infinite. We are finite. Young people especially need help in knowing that. So here's ABCs of healthy development: autonomy, belonging, competence. So we're looking for a sense, as we're developing, we're looking for a sense of control and security over the image that we project about who we are. We want people to see, we want to kind of take care of ourselves. We want to have some control over what people see of us. We need and want to feel connected. We need and want to feel belonging. And we want to be able to influence or provide some kind of meaningful contribution to the world. These things are really easy to do in the digital and more difficult to do in the real. And so it's enticing to step into these things in the digital. Let's play this video. Go ahead.
Droid.
Listen for the last word on this, or the last little sentence.
Droid DNA augmentation initiated. Neural speeds increasing to 4G LTE. Brain upgrading to a quad-core processor. Predictive intelligence with Google Now complete.
Introducing Droid DNA by HTC. It's not an upgrade to your phone. It's an upgrade to yourself.
It's not an upgrade to your phone. It's an upgrade to yourself. The implications are that you are not enough. You are not enough. Of course, 25% of young people are always connected to their devices because they're not enough without. That's the message that technology is fostering for young people. You are not enough. We as parents, we as caregivers need to help them figure out how they can be enough without, and that they are. God created them enough just as they are. This is the message of our culture, and to be aware of it and to know that kids need help setting those boundaries. Let's talk about brain development and attachment, relationships. So as a marriage and family therapist, really passionate about relationships. Some of the things that are important to be aware of, the more we do relationship via a screen, the less touch we have, right? The less human connection and contact. They say that we need, anybody know how many hugs you need a day to be healthy? They've quantified this. Anybody got thoughts on that? How many hugs do you think you need a day to be healthy? What do you think? 7, 2? 2? We are a pretty low-touch community in Minnesota, but 2 is, I think, on the low end. I've heard 5 to 12. I've heard 20. I think my colleague says 20, just because she really likes hugging her kids. I say 12, and my 14-year-old, she doesn't disagree, but she doesn't actively participate. But because it's important to her health, I'm going to help her out with that. It's funny that at 14, she does the same thing with her back that she did when she was 6 months or whatever. You remember when they did that? Are you done? Yep, I'm done. That's 3 seconds. She needed 3 seconds. You need 12 of these a day. They say that we need to be touched. We need to be touched. There are studies on orphans in communities where these infants have been held and provided all their basic needs, and a control with infants who've not been held or touched but provided their basic needs. Right? What happens, what we come to understand is that children, people who are not touched, experience more illness, experience developmental issues, developmental delays, and higher rates of mortality. We need touch. We really need touch. And the implications of doing relationship and spending more time behind a screen is that we get less touch. So we, as parents, we have to be aware of that young people, and we need boundaries with those so that they don't get in the way. I don't know what I was doing when my 7-year-old was asking about the Google. If I was on my computer and he's asking for connection with me, I'm missing an opportunity to touch, but to engage in his world. There's an author, Sherry Turkle. She's done a lot of research on this, and one of the things she says is that digital connections offer the illusion of companionship without the demands of friendship. Our networked lives allow us to hide from each other even as we are tethered together. We have this sense of belonging, right? I'm connected to people. I'm connected to my friends. I'm connected to my family. But I don't have that companionship. They don't really know me. They don't know my inadequacies. Security, but no intimacy. To be an intimate relationship, we have to be known for our insecurities and our inadequacies, right? And so another thing she says is technology encourages this fantasy that we'll never have to be alone. And if we experience being alone, then all we'll ever know is loneliness. How can we figure out how to be okay with us if all we ever know is loneliness without our device, without our screen, without people around us? We need to figure out how to be alone and good with ourselves. And one of the things that we're discovering is that emotions are co-created. They're created in connection with other people. They're created face-to-face. The mirror neurons, which are prefrontal, they help us develop empathy, they help us develop attunement, and if we aren't engaged face-to-face, we can't develop those. We can't develop empathy, we can't develop that attunement. There's a quote from a girl who was having a texting conversation with a friend that was kind of a courageous conversation, and Sherry Turkle was interviewing her about that texting that she was doing. And she said, I would never do this face-to-face. It's too emotional. It's too emotional. That's the point. How do I know what's going on inside me, and how do I understand the impact of my behavior on another person if I can't do that face-to-face? Young people need help, and they need our leadership to show them how to do that. Does anybody eat rice cakes on purpose? Anybody you don't like them, though, do you like them?
Yeah, with peanut butter.
Okay. All right, so for everybody else, this part isn't going to make sense to you. So the point of this analogy is that rice cakes are kind of like food, sort of. Sort of, right? Not really. It's more like styrofoam. But if all you had was rice cakes, you would eat more of them, right? Because it satiated you to some degree, right? One of the things that I think young people are growing up in a digital world where they're connecting and belonging and learning to contribute in the digital, they're getting a taste of what it means to be human, but nothing that satisfies them in a real way. Real face-to-face relationship, authentic conversation, sharing difficult emotional experiences. That's what's meaningful. That's what helps us develop in a healthy way. Right? And so they need our help. They need our help to show them how to do that. This was done by a company called Zone In. I think they're in Canada. And they identified kind of 4 zones that are kind of the building blocks for healthy development. So they say move, touch, connection, and nature are the building blocks for healthy connection. And then you see as you move up that kind of pyramid, you see good outcomes kind of happening. They developed what happens for people when they're engaged, overly or excessively engaged in virtual, when TV, cell phone, and internet become kind of the primary building blocks that we build our life on. We start to become sedentary, isolated, right? And that starts to have implications on our relationships, on our mental health, right? Kids don't know this. We need to help them. And I'm not saying convince them of this stuff. They need our leadership. So, isn't that cute? Do you remember when your kids did that? Have you ever had a nap like that good? Like, that's pretty good. Look at the smile and everything. So here's what the AAP, American Academy of Pediatrics, recommends for sleep. So children 3 to 5, 10 to 13 hours. Children 6 to 12, 9 to 12, and 13 to 18, 8 to 10 hours. There's a little differentiation, people in the field on this, but that's kind of the target, 9 to 10 hours. So sleep in the brain. So here's what happens with a lack of sleep, right? Drug abuse, there's a higher correlation with people who have less sleep to drug abuse, high blood pressure, obesity, depression, and anxiety. So the less sleep, there's a much greater correlation to some of these issues, okay? I'm saying this because as you see in the picture, many of us, young people included, are having difficulty disengaging from screens and really need our help in delineating those boundaries very, very clearly. Because a lack of sleep creates a potential for all kinds of other problems. Okay, this is my segue, because I'm gonna talk about something that's difficult to talk about sometimes for people. So you can see I have some phones there, and I put the skins on because I wanted them clothed. We're going to talk just briefly about pornography, and because I think in this digital age, you guys, it's really important. I went to Catholic school, and in 4th grade, Dan Tyree brought a Playboy to school, and I didn't know that until I saw a group of boys all. There might have been girls in there too. There was just a group of people all huddled around, and I kind of squeezed it. What's going on? What's going on? And I saw my first Playboy, and and then it was a long time before I ever saw anything like that again. But I did it, in and amongst people in sort of a community. There wasn't much conversation about it, but it happened, on the playground. Young people, we have access to this all the time alone, right? And so if we have a mobile device, we have access to this. If we have internet access, we have access to this. So it's really important that we're talking about this in some way with our families. I'm going to just give you some pointers on how to talk about this, okay? Take them. Don't take them, but I do think that we need to figure out how to address this with young people in a different way than our parents did with us, because it's so much more pervasive. So pornography, here's what it does. It gives us the impression that women's sexuality exists for men. Okay, so talking about this with young people, asking them what's their understanding of it. It creates unrealistic expectations, and it focuses on the physical to the exclusion of intimacy, right? As people of faith, we believe that sex is about intimacy, it's about closeness. Pornography perverts that, right? It says that that's not true in a lot of ways. So important. Talk about this with your families. Here's kind of a study. We'll skip over that. Here are some talking points, right? We are created. Arousal is a part of who we are as human beings, as children of God. Arousal is something that was created within us for a purpose. It's not in and of itself a bad thing, right? Sexual desire is normal. explore with kids what are the messages that porn gives about men and women. What are the messages that we want in our family to project about men and women and sexuality? And discuss choices when you're aroused. What are your choices? There's the moral decision making. What do you do with arousal? Okay, really important. I believe it's really important to address this in families, especially today. It was not addressed in my family. It would have been helpful, but I believe it's even more so today. We'll skip this piece. So healthy digital diet. Anybody really like chocolate chip cookies? I'm a huge chocolate chip cookie person. Do you do this? I like to have 2 cookies and put them back to back and eat them at the same time because twice the cookie, half the time. Do you do that? I took an eating disorder class in grad school, and I started to get worried, so I went and asked Leah Walls, who was the instructor. She worked over at the Emily program, and I said, Leah, I think I have a problem. And she said, I think you're okay. I said, but I really like chocolate chip cookies. And then I explained to her twice a cookie, half the time, and she said, you're weird, but I think you're okay. But I really like chocolate chip cookies. Really, really like them. I give them up for Lent because I want to help reset myself and remind myself that I don't need them to live. But one of the things that I think we're doing in our culture, right, 7.5 hours of entertainment technology a day, right? That's chocolate chip cookies. That's more than twice the cookie half the time. That's 7.5 hours of cookies. My premise here is that entertainment technology, especially when it's alone by ourselves, that's dessert, and we're treating it as our kind of a substantial meal. We have to help figure out how to create create that mentality that that's a treat. That's a once in a while thing. That's a 1 hour a day or just on weekends thing. I really I'm conflicted about this. I really do enjoy the NFL. I think the game is so fun. I think it's fun to play. It's fun to watch. It's fun to play in video games. But one of the things that, I'm conflicted because it's doing some pretty permanent damage to many of our young men. However, there's a differential here that I want to highlight between the NFL and LOL. Who knows what LOL is? Anybody know? Not laugh out loud. It's not laugh out loud. League of Legends, right? Yep. Who knows what Who knows what WoW is? World of Warcraft. You were going to say that. I already kind of gave. World of Warcraft. So here's the differential on the NFL versus League of Legends or World of Warcraft. The NFL season is what, 5 months long, 4 months long? It's kind of long. And who knows what's coming up in, a week when it comes to the NFL? The draft, that's right. And Roger Goodell has made that like a huge deal. That'll be a, kind of a circus too. But for the most part, especially once my team is out, after the Minneapolis Miracle, that thing at Philly, whatever that was, I'm not as interested anymore. But I really do get excited about the NFL. Now, the NFL has external parameters around my interest, right? Games are on Sundays, occasionally a Thursday, but it's not 24 hours, right? In World of Warcraft, League of Legends, these are 24 hours, 7 days a week. There are not external parameters around those interests. Young people, we can play those at all times, and if we're not playing them, we can watch them on YouTube. We can watch our other people play the games on YouTube. There aren't external parameters. Part of our job as caregivers and parents is to help our kids figure out how to create those external parameters and get their own internal parameters eventually. We're looking for them to figure out how to manage that themselves. We're looking for self-regulation. We're looking for them to at the end of their time, manage their emotions, right? 5 more minutes, I know, but I asked you to do this, and it's time to come to dinner. We're looking for them to get off the game or get off their phone or get off without the tantrum, like Diane's son. That's what we're looking for. We need to help them, and if they're not there yet, we have to help shape that. Healthy digital diet looks like engagement in the real, okay? Engagement in the real is where we primarily exist. Anything that we do in the digital may complement what we do in the real. But if you start to feel like it's tipping, that's becoming unhealthy. So connecting with friends who you see and play with on Saturday at soccer and hang out with after school with and play Fortnite for a couple hours on Sunday, if that supports relationship in the real, that's what healthy digital life looks like. When we start to sense as though my son, my daughter, my spouse, whatever it is engaging, in their world in the digital, that's when it becomes problematic, and we need to help reshape that, often pretty quickly and dramatically. One of the things that I know is hard at my house is anxiety management without technology, and management and dealing with boredom without technology. Right, so my kids will frequently come and say, I want to play Madden Mobile. Right, my 7-year-old just finished season 1, his first season of Madden Mobile. He was so excited, and now he's reinforced. Right, the digital game that reinforced him, so he's excited to play more. Part of what my job as a parent is to help him experience and decide how he wants to manage boredom with different ways. Okay, that's our job too. And if parents, I'll give this to you guys, so you get to use this with your kiddos. When your kid comes and says they're bored, you get to tell them, "You're welcome. That is my gift to you." Think about that. Boredom is a luxury, right? Boredom is a luxury. We live in a community in which we have free time. Young people, you have free time, and your gift is you get to decide what to do with it. And it isn't always Madden Mobile. I give that gift freely to you. Don't take on their boredom. That is their dilemma. Help them decide, not decide, but help them experience that dilemma more frequently. It's really a gift. The other thing that we know about boredom is that whole different neural networks operate when we're bored. And if young people are not having that opportunity to be bored, they aren't accessing those parts of their brains. Help your young person experience boredom. It's really, really important and healthy for them to do it. And another thing about anxiety, one of the things that I saw a CNN poll that asked if the question was, have you ever pretended to use your phone in public to avoid engaging with somebody else, right? 8 out of 10 of us have done that. And it's not that that's a bad thing, but how and when can we stay in the real even with that anxiety, okay? So not using technology sometimes to resolve that anxiety is really important. Because what happens, you guys, is it reinforces social anxiety when we're going to the phone when we're anxious. When we feel an awkward pause in the conversation, we go to text somebody else. That's social anxiety rearing its head and being reinforced when we get away from the tension, right? Get away from the stress. So we have to help young people figure out how to do that. Children's behavior. So we, as a family, are the container for children, the family, right? Our job is to contain children and help shape the family so they can grow up and be healthy. If you sense that your container and your children are struggling to be healthy, part of our job is to reshape the container, okay? Here are some ways that we're responsible to do that. The 3 main functions of parenting: safety, nurture, and challenge, okay? When things aren't going well in families, sometimes what happens is this third little piece kind of shrinks, this challenge piece. Safety and nurture can be real strong, but the challenge piece shrinks. And so this is where we're feeling ineffective with our boundaries. Okay, this is where, I said 10 o'clock and, there's a power struggle and everybody kind of loses it and I feel like I've lost as a parent. That's when that challenge piece is not working. Okay, safety, nurture, challenge. So challenge is discipline. Nurture is showing loving kindness. Safety is making sure that our kids are For my 7-year-old, it's we're going to hold hands as we walk across the street. For my 11-year-old, it's I want to watch you walk across the street. For my 14-year-old, it's I want you to call me from Bergen's phone when you get to voice lessons today. Okay, we provide different at different stages. With internet safety, it's with my 7-year-old, I'm going to watch him play. I'm going to be, if he's online, I'm online with him. With my 11-year-old, I want him to come report to me what he did. With my 14-year-old, I'm monitoring her from afar and talking with her about social media use. Okay, so the safety nurture challenge. This is what gets in the way for us. Well, let's see. Yeah, let's go here. So some of the things that make it hard to challenge are feeling guilty, feeling as though there's something that I did that's contributing to my kid's stuckness. Or sometimes we get a sense of hope and we ease up on the boundaries. They just turned their homework in, or they told me that this week it's going to go better. Or fear. If I don't do this, they won't go to school. Or if I have had numerous families, if I don't get my phone, the kid will say, if I don't get my phone, I'm not going to school. So worrying that they won't do the things that are pro-social and in their best interest. And sympathy, feeling bad. They don't have any friends in the real. So this is their only sense of hope. This is the only thing that is any fun for them. This gets in the way of us creating that container in a way that's useful. Here's when you're working with your co-parents, when you're working to shape the container, these things are critical. Align as leaders. Align as parents. Are iPads going back and forth through schools and homes for you guys? Chromebooks, anything like that? Sometimes those become difficult too because the school is involved in that. So sometimes it's working with the school to identify what are the behaviors you're concerned about at home and what are you wanting for them at home, and what are the things that you're wanting for them at school, and how can we make both of these things happen? There's a lot of triangulation that's happening between school and kids and parents, so clear that up with the leadership, right? And then decide what you're going to do. So that's kind of how we want to see people reset the container. Is this too small? This is the other side of that email, or that post from Diane. She says, I realized this AM after watching my son's reaction, after seeing the results of his temper tantrum, that we as parents are allowing this to happen. I am allowing this to happen. This reward that I have given him, his phone, has grown into a monster of sorts. Change needs to happen, and it starts at home. I am committed to do everything I can to have a well-rounded, functional children. They need us, you guys. They need us. They're entering into a world in which digital technology is all they know. They need us to help put boundaries in place. They need us to hold them accountable to those times where it's time to unplug. They need us to help them experience boredom. They need us to help them experience some anxiety about their face-to-face relationships. They need us to help coach them through courageous conversations and not do it on text. Anybody familiar with this? This was a woman in New York who wrote a contract to her son Gregory. This was about 8 years ago. Anybody ever see this? I think this is really cool. She wrote, Merry Christmas, aren't I a great parent? I'm giving you an iPhone. And she says, and so here's her contract. Rule number 1, it is my phone, I bought it, I pay for it, I am loaning it to you, aren't I the greatest? I just love that. And I will always, here's point 2, I will always know the password and hand over the phone to parents promptly at 7:30, whatever the time is. And it does not go to school with you. You are responsible for replacement costs and repairs. So she's getting very clear that I am going to help shape your digital world. I'm going to help shape how you engage with this. She also says, do not use this technology to lie, fool, or deceive another human being. And then point 11, I love, turn it off, silence it, put it away in public. And I love that. I think kids need us to say that and then hold them accountable. And then the last one, I always get, I'm going to try and hold it together, but I always get a little teary when I read this one, at the very end of this one. You will mess up. I will take your phone away. We will sit down and talk about it. We will start over again, you and I. We are always learning. I am on your team. We are in this together. That part always gets me. I am on your team. I think we need to remind our kids of that. I am on your team. We are in this together. I am not taking this away from you because you're a bad kid. I'm not taking it away from you because I hate you or I want your life to be miserable. I'm taking it away from you because we're going to learn. We're in this together. I love that. Young people need that kind of leadership. Direct, clear, here are the boundaries. And we are in a world that's saying there shouldn't be any boundaries. And that's not how we function. They need very clear boundaries. They need relationship in the real. So here's what we're looking for. We're looking for young people to master some skills when it comes to digital technology, right? So one of the skills that you might have at your household is we're going to introduce this phone, or you get to play games, but we want you to be in the present. We want you to know what that feels like. We want you to figure out how you're going to fully engage in who's in front of you. Okay, you can quantify that a little bit more. Here's what that looks like. Back to the woman who wrote to her son, sending relationship-affirming messages. Talk with your sons, your daughters about what kind of messages to send and not send. And then identify appropriate text versus face-to-face conversations. I had a colleague of mine, older than me. She said, I was with her when she got a text from her sister that said her dad had died. That is not the kind of text that you want to receive. And young people are not going to know that without our leadership. Help them understand what kinds of conversations and how to do relationship through text and what to do face-to-face and how to have some of those courageous conversations that may feel too emotional. Help them manage that anxiety so that they can, because they're really important. And if they're not able to, we're missing an opportunity for connection and intimacy. We're missing an opportunity to learn empathy and to attune to another human being. And we're missing an opportunity to be more human and have our basic human needs met. Talk with your kids about digital technology when you're talking about drugs. This is important. Technology is reinforcing us in ways that are similar to how we experience some of the narcotics. The dopamine wash and the kinds of things that's going on in our brain. Talk to them about digital technology and boundaries and what could be problematic. And this one is really important. Responsibility comes before privilege, right? Mom, I'll do this if you just give me that. Well, maybe, but this is what we expect, and then you get that privilege, right? So many families feel held hostage. I'll do this pro-social behavior, but first I get to do this. Young people need to know that responsibility is before that. And if you're backing down to that, they're holding you hostage because they want you want the pro-social behavior more than they do. So you have to be ready to let them experience the consequences of not getting what it is that you want for them. You have to be ready for that. You have to be ready to say no. That was a hard no. A colleague of mine, Dr. David Walsh. Anybody know Dr. David Walsh? He's one of my heroes. He wrote a book called No. That's what it's called, No. I just love it. Because I think it's a really important reminder that kids need that kind of authoritative parenting. Kids need us to set those boundaries. They keep looking. Is that a real boundary? And sometimes we've kind of waffled, right? And so, they kind of push harder to see, is that really going to stay there? Is that boundary real? We need to be that solid boundary. To validate how difficult it is. I know that in the past, I let you play video games from Friday after school to Monday morning. I know that. And I know how hard this is because I'm changing the rules on you. And they need that. So if you've done that in the past, validate how difficult it is, but do say no. Children, I think this is a great kind of rule of thumb. Children do not have technology more advanced than their parents. Okay? How will you know how to help them with that device if they have the iPhone 75 and you have the iPhone 2? Right? Are we up to 75? I'm not sure what we're at. Yeah, I think it does. Yeah. So children do not have more advanced technology. You won't know how to manage it if they have the newest device and you don't. Do you guys know this? Young people, do you know this? Alarm clocks? Like, that's an actual thing. It's an actual thing. A cell phone is not a good alarm clock for any of us, really, but especially what we're saying about the influence and the draw of digital technology. It is too much for young people to refrain. They really need help, and if getting up is the point, now they'll hold that hostage, right? If you don't give me that, I won't give up. I won't get up. Okay, I'm sorry. Here's what's expected in the morning: your chores, breakfast, and get to school. If you don't, your mom and I, your dad and I are going to have to talk about what we need to do to support you in moving in that direction, right? Because if they say, well, if you don't give me my cell phone, I'm not going to get up and I'm not going to school, right? Responsibility before privilege. They're saying privilege before responsibility. It doesn't work that way. We need to help them. So an alarm clock is a good example of that. We are leading and modeling how we behave with our devices. Kids are watching. My kids, because they don't really have anything, are constantly watching and giving us feedback, which is really good. And I'm not saying parents, you can't do it differently. We watch different movies than our kids. It's okay to use your devices differently, but be receptive to the kids' questions. Think about it. Take it in. Yeah, you know what, kiddo, thank you for the feedback. I'm going to talk about that with your mom. I'm going to think about that a little bit. I appreciate the challenge on that because, yeah, I have to monitor this for myself too. They are watching, and we are leading and modeling. You have more control over digital devices. Over Wi-Fi than you do data. So just as you think about what comes into your home, data is more difficult. You can do some limitations, but some of the providers, cell phone providers, are more difficult to manage data. Wi-Fi, you have a lot more control, right? You can set your router to, anybody have routers that they can manage and shut things down on certain devices? Those are great because those are putting those boundaries in place for kids. And for us, frankly, too. Kids need those. So Wi-Fi, you have more control. Digital, or the data, you have less control. Again, teach boredom. And then a lot of times we feel like kids should know this stuff, right? You should be doing this. This is how you should do this. You should use your phone this way. You shouldn't do this. Stop shoulding on them. You hear that? It sounds like another word. Don't should on them. That's funny to me. Okay. So that's a shaming. That's a sense of shaming, right? There's something wrong with you. You should know better, right? That's shaming. They don't know better. Let's take the word should out of our vocabulary. Pay attention because you use it a lot more than you know. You use it for yourself too. So pay close attention to that. But when you do that to kids, it gives them the message that there's something wrong with me. Which, when I feel that way, I often want to go to something that makes me feel better. And guess what I'm susceptible to doing to make me feel better? Go to the very thing that people are telling me not to go to because I enjoy it so much. So be careful take it out of your vocabulary. So those are a few things that I've learned about this. Here are some, I think, good resources. You guys are probably familiar with Common Sense Media. A great way to evaluate different kinds of media, not just movies and music, but apps and websites too. So there's a lot to learn there. One of my colleagues and friend, Dave Eisenman, works in the district, Minnetonka School District, and he's a great resource for parents and academic, academic technology, but lots of safety information and that kind of thing for parents. So he's a great resource. He has a blog and a website. Sherry Turkle, we talked about her a lot. She's done probably numerous TED Talks. Watch them with your spouse, your co-parents. Watch them, and then talk about watching them with your kids. They may have value in watching them with your kids. NetSmarts, you guys are probably familiar with that. Did anybody do NetSmarts in school? Who does NetSmarts in school? Yeah, NetSmarts is about safety, internet safety. There's a lot of stuff there. And then anybody heard of Wait Till 8th? Anybody heard of that? Wait Till 8th is a new campaign to wait until 8th grade to give kids a cell phone. And they're highlighting probably some of the things that we talked about here tonight, the difficulty refraining from the impulse to reach for technology to resolve boredom or anxiety, right? The kind of the development of relationships and the ease at which with which I can develop relationships through a screen and the difficulty that I have in the real. So they're saying wait till 8. Like I said, mine is probably 17 after she starts driving. That's how it is now, okay? So I'm not saying how you're doing it and it's wrong. I'm just saying I'm trying to figure this out too. For my oldest in particular, there are some ways that she presents that I don't think, she's ready. She doesn't demonstrate the privilege before, or the responsibility before privilege yet with some of these issues. But I appreciate that somebody else is putting a stake in the ground around that. This is another video. I think we'll end on this one. Yeah, cue it up, okay.
There are over 500,000 apps and counting on the iPhone. Apps that can take you anywhere and do anything. You might say there's no limit to what this amazing device can do. So the question to ask is, why would anyone want to limit the iPhone?
Why would anyone want to limit the
Truly
iPhone?
unlimited data for your iPhone.
That is exactly what kids need us to do. That is exactly what our task is as parents in the digital age. It is our job to limit their technology use, to focus it and contain it. That is our job. Here, this might be helpful. How to know when to get support if you're finding difficulty implementing rules to change behaviors, okay? Or if there's significant escalation, okay, there's aggression or violence. And if parents are not aligned on strategies, that can be problematic. I know at my house, one of the things that happens when my wife and I are not aligned, we start experiencing a lot more pushback from the kids. And then if I talked about children holding hostage pro-social behaviors to get technology, and then if you find that you have a young person who's just disappeared, that's a time to reach out and get support from somebody, a marriage and family therapist, a psychologist, somebody who can help you figure out how to move forward. And then this is just a little bit about our practice. We really are about families. We started working in this area because families came to us and they said, we don't know how to help our kids do this well. And so we've responded by kind of working with families around lots of things, but technology-related issues is one of those things. So I'm so grateful to be in it with you guys, trying to figure out how to help our kids do this well. We can take just a few questions, and then, or what do you want to do, Tyler?
Let's start by thanking Matt for being with us tonight. A round of applause. So that last video, or the last video, that is a piece of media that I remember seeing, and I remember feeling very weird about it.
Yeah.
Another one recently hit me, and maybe it's just a comment more than a question, just to get our Q&A off to a start here, is I think it was for Google Home or one of these platforms that you referred to earlier, that I heard on the radio that was marketing, just making us aware that you could say, hey Alexa, hey Google, read a bedtime story to Johnny.
Yeah. Yep.
And that to me just, I don't know if anyone else is like, feels weird about that. But technology is not here to replace our interpersonal or intimate relationships in any capacity. Yep. And so that was just one thing that I don't know who is attracted to hearing such marketing, but it just made me feel really weird. And I'm not a parent yet, but I mean, I parent 130 of you, but in some way. But that said, I think I hope I speak for our community in saying thank you for helping us navigate this, because it's 2018 is as hard as it's ever been to be a parent. So thank you for being here.
I think of I resist taking the escalator if people are standing on it. It's my own thing, but or the people mover, right? You know, at the airport, people who just stand on the, if they're kind of plugged up, I'm gonna kind of just walk on the actual, sidewalk part of the airport. I think for me, the thing about technology and the people mover and the escalator is that they can be there to help facilitate me, moving, but not do it for me. And to think about that with technology, reading a story to my kids, hey Google, read us a bedtime story while I sit and cuddle with my son, that's a different experience than, hey, good night, James. Hey Google, play a bedtime story for James. Good night, buddy. It's a different experience, right? So I think there are ways that we can use it to be relationship affirming, but the point is that we have to be really aware of how we're doing it, why we're doing it, and how it's shaping us. Kids need to figure out how to help it complement their real world relationships, not take over. So, thoughts, questions, reflections.
I can bring the microphone to anybody as well if anybody has any questions. Just so we pick it up for the
And do we need it for the webcast or whatever? Okay.
I have lots of questions, but first I'm going to say, wow, you're not giving your kid a phone. Are you doing a flip phone?
We might do a flip phone at 17. We'll see.
Okay.
Right now it's 17. We'll see.
Is she getting picked on because of not having?
No, she's not. She did have her friends. Her friends circled my wife, and my wife is 5'1", and they're all taller than her. So a crowd of them came around her. I was kind of surprised by this very bold move and said, "You need to get." Our daughter's name is Joy. You need to get Joy a cell phone. I thought that was really bold. I would have never spoken to my friend's parents that way. But anyway,
is she missing out on anything, do you feel?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. She's starting to get it. As she's watching some of her peers, she's starting to get it. Mm-hmm. And she can always borrow our cell phone too to text friends and stuff. But she's the other unintended. Can I? Do
you have a rotary phone then at home too?
We have a home phone. It's a voice over internet. So I don't know. Does anybody have an actual landline through Comcast anymore? It's like what, $30 a month, $40 a month. Voice over internet. So if you have internet service, it's like you pay taxes. It's $5 a month. So we do that in part because we want kids having access to friends and being able to call. I think some of them even text. Some of those voice over internets text. But here's an unintended consequences of kids having cell phones. We don't have access to their friends the way I had access to my friends' parents. Right? The Search Institute says that 3 or more adult relationships that a kid has with adults outside of the family makes them at much correlates with lots of greater outcomes. Right? So the more that we can help facilitate connection with adults too. So that's one of the reasons I actually appreciate being able to, hi Selena, you calling for Joy? Oh, how are you? Oh, I'll go get her. That gets skipped and bypassed when kids have cell phones. So think about that too. We build our buildings, they build us. That's an unintended consequences of kids having that kind of access to their friends. I'm not saying bad or good. I'm just saying that they're having less adult contact, which I think if we're not intentional about creating that or finding ways to incorporate that, they're missing. Yeah. So go ahead. You had another one.
Well,
sorry. You got a list. Go.
I'm trying to clarify this question in my head, but you did kind of mention bullying really briefly on social media. Do you have any ideas of ways to avoid that, and other than not having?
I think kids need lots of oversight from adults. So if your kid is going to have a social media account, you have to have some oversight, right? I understand you want privacy, and it's my job to help use this responsibly. So I will be having oversight. I'm not going to look through everything. I'm not going to, pick through and criticize you about stuff. I'm looking to make sure that how you're interacting with people is affirming and safe. I think if we're allowing our young people to have social media, we have to provide that oversight. So does that answer that question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your information. I have you mentioned monitoring from afar for your 14-year-old, and interested in your thoughts on resources for that, or where do I start?
Say more. Monitoring from afar.
Monitoring internet use, or how to see what kids are doing if they did have a phone. How do I know what she's doing on her phone?
First of all, password. If she's gonna have a phone, I'm gonna know her password, and she's gonna check it in. I think that's important. I also I know that there are apps that give you access to other people's devices. You can set it up to do that. I don't know what some of those are. So it'd be searching some of those. How do I monitor my kids' use? What apps help me monitor my kids' use of their cell phone? I think a big key is making sure that you have that password, and they know that you have that password. I was working with one family who did not tell their son that they had their password, and helped them navigate that. But that went poorly because it felt kind of betrayal, So they have to know. Here's a privilege. Here's what comes with this privilege. Right? Yeah.
I just have something to add to that too. I know some families that will put all their chargers are downstairs.
Mm-hmm.
So the kids won't have their phones with them in their bed, and the only way to charge it is to charge it downstairs in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
That's one way to kind of help at the night stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
So.
So there are apps that do that. There's apps that start cars, there's apps that turn our lights on. There are apps that shut things down on the phone, but could you compare that to the contract that mom wrote? Because, the app in my mind is just another technology, controlling technology. Can you compare the pros and cons to the contract that mom wrote and how they have to deal with it to an app that controls your phone? And, well, gee, Mom, can't you just turn the app back on?
Yeah, the contract, I think, is good point. Thanks for helping me get back there, too, because I think the contract is about relationship. The app is about solving a kind of a temporary problem, right? And so that's what I love about how she talked about it. This is mine. We're going to sit down. We're going to walk into how to use it, what our expectations are. I'm going to take it away from time to time. I think that's the focus, that it's about the relationship. So if you can construct something that helps you attune together, and then here might be some tools that we're going to use to help monitor, but we're always going to come back together. Yeah, good. Do you have, okay. Any others?
One thing that I've noticed, I have a 17-year-old in addition to my 13-year-old. And one thing that I noticed is when you talk about hijacking your parents, it's not even just the kid doing it intentionally. Sometimes you find yourself in situations like with sport groups, like they're on a team and they're like, I want all the girls on this group chat, and I want all, well, now, how do they do that if they don't have a phone? And if they're don't have access to this, and you say, well, I'm not ready for you to have that, well, now they're left out. So it becomes, it's almost like it'd be nice if before these things were started, parents could say, you know what, before we're going to say, I want all the girls on this, well, do all the girls have this? It becomes very, very tricky at home. We
experienced some of this too with our daughter when she's going on trips and stuff, right? So So teachers will, want to send out a blast to everybody, and it's like, you can't do it for our daughter. You have to communicate with us.
Right. And then
There is some
argument
resistance to that.
Yeah, and the argument is, well, we want the child to become responsible for themselves, so we don't want you to be part of that. Well, you have to be part of it.
Yep.
It's really
tricky. It is really tricky, and that's where sometimes sitting down with, with the school or with the team coach and saying, here, look, this is what we're doing in our house, and I appreciate the dilemma that you're in because you're just wanting to communicate information. How can we make this work for us and for you? I think that, getting adults on the same page, even after the fact, it would have been nice to be on the same page beforehand, but how can we do it after the fact? Here's where we're coming from. Where are you coming from? How can we make this work for all of us, for our kid? And sometimes we put the kid in the middle, where, let me see if I can think of a digital example of that. Well, I can think of another example. My daughter was upset that we chose a high school for her, that she wanted to go to a different high school, and it just wasn't feasible for us. And she was getting messages from her teachers at school, from her dance studio, and others that she should get to make the choice, right? So she was really angry at us. And I understand, this is our decision, we're getting your input, but it's ultimately our decision. And we said, and then we circled back with the other adults and we said, hey, if you guys are uncomfortable, I don't know what you said, if you're uncomfortable about the decision, let's keep that between us, and let's not include her in that. Let's get on the same page here first. So I couldn't think of a digital example, but when there are those kinds of things, get on the same page with the adults. Hey, you guys, at our house, we don't have our kids doing that. How can we get the information? Because sometimes, we feel like, it's our fault for excluding them, and so I feel like, I have to go and get them a cell phone now, or they have to be on that app. I'm not comfortable with that, but get on the same page with the other adults. Here's where we're coming. We're just not ready for that yet. How can we make this work? Is there a way to facilitate this? Can you do an email list and a group me list and do both? How can we make this happen? Because we are just not ready for that. So the adult piece, the leadership, the being together, united, that's the key. That is, I think, for me, the key on this, that we're not, as a community, we're not aligned, right? And that's a big part of where the problems are. So part of it is starting in your home with your other parent, and then when you're experiencing dissonance with the school or whatever, or friends, get on the same page with other people. Here's how it's going in our house. How is it going at your house? How can we make this work? So that leadership piece is really, really important.
You have time for maybe one or two more. Does anybody else have any other questions for Matt? Yes.
I completely agree, but I have a question. When I was young, things like we took beads and we put them on safety pins, and it was the phase.
Yeah.
Right?
I remember that, right? You put them on your pants.
Yep.
That's right, I remember that.
And so we always had all these little phases, and after a couple months, and Mom had bought all the beads, and we'd run everywhere, the phase was over, right? Mm-hmm. At some point in time, is that, from a psychological standpoint, Fortnite is going to be over and something else will come. If we eliminate the stuff that they're learning through the technology, will it naturally progress because we progress? Or does it is this technology, is what we're into right now, such a strong addiction or can we teach them, like I learned that all of a sudden, okay, that was wasting my time, I needed to move on. Yeah. I learned that.
Yeah.
Or by kind of eliminating it. I mean, I was young. I was in 4th grade when I went through that, right? Yep. I eliminated it myself. If we take it away from them, are we not teaching them to eliminate that stuff by themselves?
For some people, some of this stuff will be a phase. For others, we're finding people get really, really stuck. They get really stuck. And so there are things that make them more at risk for getting stuck. I highlighted a few of them at the beginning. But certainly just brain development and the way that technology reinforces us is one way that we're really susceptible to becoming engaged in this in a way that's problematic, in a way that some of the fads that, do you guys remember the rolling of the jeans? Do you remember that thing? Whatever that was. Or whatever the fad is, in a way that those aren't rewarding. I mean, there's a little bit of a social, wow, cool pants, but it doesn't keep us engaged the way digital technology does. So, yeah.
I think I'm loud enough. I'm piggybacking
You have to.
Yeah, what Jody said, because I went through the same thing in about 3rd or 4th grade.
With the beads?
Well, not with beads, in
friendship
television.
pins, that's right. Yeah.
In television is what I did. So
In television,
it was like
I kind of
Atari.
remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I played my game and I was done.
Yeah.
I mean, after it was a waste of a good 6 months.
Yeah.
But is that female versus male?
Well, maybe some of it.
Because she doesn't have the issue that my son would have.
Some of it may be female versus male, but also, I mean, in television it was one-dimensional. What was your game on in television?
Dungeons and Dragons.
Dungeons and Dragons. It was one-dimensional, right? I'm kind of remembering. It was very, very simple. There were levels probably.
Yep.
But it wasn't a 100-hour game, right? The novelty wore off very quickly. Many of the games and the ways that we're using technology today, the novelty is infinite. It's astronomical. There are levels upon levels. It keeps going. And so that's where the technology itself is different. And so that's a part of it. But some of it may be, in terms of what I experience is girls have more difficulty relating to social media in ways that are healthy. They act out kind of bullying behaviors and shaming, self-shame, and other, on other people. And boys can get sucked into more kind of gaming and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm.
All right, we have one more at least.
Can you talk a little bit more about what happens in the brain when there's an addiction to the technology? Or
we highlighted just a little bit what happens when we become engaged in a kind of an addictive process. Is we get like a dopamine burst, right? Dopamine is kind of a feel-good pleasure kind of neurotransmitter, and what happens is as we do a behavior, we end up needing more to get the same rush. And so that's where that building up the tolerance and needing to do more happens. We're getting more pleasure, we're getting more of that dopamine, but we need to do it more in order to get the same amount. So does that help? Is that what you were looking for?
That's what happens then that takes the place of the personal?
Yep.
That's more satisfying then?
Say again.
That would be more satisfying then than the personal relationship?
Absolutely. It's much easier to get kind of a feel-good experience from that than being face-to-face, because being face-to-face is unpredictable, it's hard, it's anxious. Yep. You want to keep going?
Okay, we're almost
Okay,
at time, but
okay.
we got one more.
Okay.
Got to listen to Carrie B.
Okay.
When do these brains stop developing?
Well,
You talked about as our brains are developing, and are we more susceptible to addiction throughout that time? And when is it that our brains are growing up?
The auto rental industry says we're done at 25, right? You guys, your auto insurance goes down at 25, the cost goes, or when you get married, apparently. So they've just quantified the data. There are fewer accidents with people over 25. So I think, and that's what the research is telling us too, that there's maturation somewhere around age 25, full maturation of the brain. Yes, we are susceptible to addiction at any age, but the developmental window of adolescence makes us really susceptible. And then being sort of wired as a young person to be engaged in technology makes us really susceptible, because we're wiring our brains around that. I had a last little story. I had a girl from Northfield. She wasn't a client. She was a student doing a project on technology and kind of addiction. And she said, I can't remember her name. It's like Miranda or something, really sweet. And her dad, Mark, called with her. They called me together on a conference call. And she said, hey, Matt, what's the difference between, or is there a difference between a young person that might be wrestling with this and an older person? And I said, I hadn't thought about that. That's a really interesting question. I love those questions that make you kind of go inside yourself and figure something out new. So kind of synthesizing your information. And I said, that's a really interesting question. I said, my experience is that when I'm working with an older person that has behavior around this that's kind of addictive-like, they often have they have old patterns and old ways of being in the real to go back to. They have old other ways of managing anxiety, unless they were addicted to something else, alcohol or drugs or something. But if they didn't, they have other ways of doing that. I said my experience with young people is part of it is teaching them all new ways of managing anxiety and dealing with, myself, dealing with the person in the mirror. So I just thought that was fascinating. So there's a window in which we're really developmentally susceptible to being wired around this stuff. And that's why young people need our help. Now, not every young person is going to be addicted, but look at the culture that we have, right? Look at the culture that we have. We are not, we're driving down the highway doing things that are compulsive, right? So they need our help. We need to lead them. Go and do really hard work. Set those boundaries. Be clear about what those boundaries are. Work with your co-parent to make sure that you're aligned. Work with the school. Work with your sports teams to say, this is where we're coming from. Where are you coming from? How can we facilitate both interests? Really good to be with you guys. If you're looking for support beyond this, feel free to grab my card, call my practice. We'd be open to connecting and supporting you in other ways if we can. Thank you.
Well, thank you again, Neil. Let's give him a round of applause. I just find this very interesting, even for me. And me and Julie were sitting back there, and we're like, "Oh, that's cool." And I'm like, "Oh, maybe I'm addicted to that." So it's just kind of nice to get a recheck too for ourselves as well. So thank you for being here. We have some treats out in the Northex for you, and also to reiterate what Tyler said about our digital books that we have in our library as well. So if you have any, want to look at those or rent them out and whatnot too. So.
All right, and we're going to close our evening together in prayer. Excuse my voice, but let's pray together. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this evening together where we can wrestle with and talk about such an important topic in our lives and in the lives of our children and youth here at Trinity. And I just pray that we would use our technology for affirming in safe ways, help us to empower each other to use it for good and just to spread your love to others. Help us to be that light for others. And thank you for this time and place to be able to focus on this topic. In your name we pray. Amen.